At the luxurious Grand Pinnacle Hotel in New York, a black woman CEO named Aisha Carter handed over her exclusive black card to check in, only to be met with mocking laughter from the staff, unaware that their ridicule would cost them a $2.8 billion deal she cancelled on the spot. The incident, which unfolded in early 2025, sent shockwaves through the corporate world and exposed the deep-seated biases that still linger in even the most elite spaces. Aisha Carter had built her empire from the ground up. At 38 years old, she was the CEO of Carter Tech Innovations, a company that had revolutionized sustainable energy solutions. Her journey to the top had been anything but easy. Born in a small town in Georgia, Aisha grew up in a working-class family where her parents struggled to make ends meet. Her mother worked as a schoolteacher, and her father was a mechanic, but they instilled in her a fierce determination to succeed. Aisha excelled in school, earning a scholarship to MIT where she studied electrical engineering. After graduating, she worked tirelessly in the tech industry, facing countless rejections and microaggressions because of her race and gender. But Aisha never let that stop her. In 2015, she founded Carter Tech with a vision to make renewable energy accessible to underserved communities, and by 2025, her company was valued at over $10 billion. That January morning, Aisha had flown into New York for a pivotal business meeting. Carter Tech was on the verge of signing a $2.8 billion deal with Pinnacle Enterprises, the parent company of the Grand Pinnacle hotel chain. The deal involved a partnership to install Carter Tech's cutting-edge solar panels and energy storage systems in all of Pinnacle's properties worldwide. It was a landmark agreement, one that would solidify Carter Tech's position as a global leader in sustainable tech and bring Pinnacle into the future of green hospitality. Aisha had been working on this partnership for over a year, negotiating terms, reviewing contracts, and building a rapport with Pinnacle's executives. Everything was set to be finalized that week during her stay at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel in Manhattan. Aisha arrived at the hotel after a long flight, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and white blouse, her signature look that exuded confidence and professionalism. She had reserved the presidential suite, a perk she often allowed herself during high-stakes business trips. At the front desk, she handed over her black card, a rare invitation-only credit card issued by an elite financial institution, reserved for individuals with a net worth in the tens of millions. The card was a symbol of her success, a testament to the barriers she had broken through to reach this level of achievement. But the reaction she received was far from what she expected. The front desk clerk, a young man named Ethan, took one look at the card and smirked. He turned to his colleague, a woman named Samantha, and whispered something that made her giggle. Aisha, who had dealt with subtle racism her entire life, immediately sensed the shift in their demeanor. Ethan looked back at Aisha and said in a tone dripping with condescension that he needed to verify the card. He made a show of examining it, holding it up to the light as if it were a counterfeit bill, while Samantha snickered behind her hand. Aisha stood there, her jaw tightening as Ethan finally spoke again, his voice loud enough for other guests in the lobby to hear. He questioned whether the card was really hers, suggesting she might have borrowed it from someone else. The implication was clear. He didn't believe a black woman could legitimately possess such a card. Aisha felt a familiar anger rising in her chest, but she kept her composure. She had faced this kind of treatment before, being underestimated, stereotyped, and dismissed because of her race. She had been followed in stores, questioned by security at events, and overlooked in boardrooms despite her credentials. But this moment at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel felt different. It wasn't just a personal slight. It was a direct attack on her authority as a CEO, a leader who had earned her place at the table. She asked Ethan to process the card and check her in, her voice calm but firm. Instead, he doubled down, saying he needed to call his manager to confirm the card's authenticity. By now, a small crowd of guests had gathered, some whispering among themselves as they watched the scene unfold. The manager, a middle-aged man named Richard, arrived a few minutes later. He took one look at Aisha, then at the card, and let out a chuckle. He told her that they didn't see many cards like this, especially not from someone like her. The phrase, "someone like her," hung in the air, heavy with unspoken prejudice. Richard suggested that Aisha might want to use a different card, one they could process more easily. He said this with a smile, as if he were doing her a favor, but the undertone was unmistakable. He didn't believe she belonged there. Aisha's patience, which she had held onto so tightly, finally snapped. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on Richard's, and asked if he knew who she was. Richard shrugged, clearly unimpressed, and said he didn't have time for games. Aisha then introduced herself as the CEO of Carter Tech Innovations, the company that was set to sign a $2.8 billion deal with Pinnacle Enterprises. She watched as the color drained from Richard's face, but she wasn't done. She told him that she had been disrespected in his hotel, not just as a guest but as a businesswoman who had worked tirelessly to get to where she was. She said that she didn't tolerate disrespect, especially not from a company she was about to partner with. And then, in a move that stunned everyone in the lobby, Aisha pulled out her phone and dialed Pinnacle's CEO, Jonathan Harper, right then and there. Jonathan had been Aisha's main point of contact during the negotiations. They had met several times over the past year, and he had always treated her with respect, recognizing the value Carter Tech brought to the table. When Jonathan answered the call, Aisha didn't waste any time. She told him exactly what had happened at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel, how she had been laughed at, questioned, and humiliated by the staff when she tried to use her black card. She explained that this wasn't just a personal insult, it was a reflection of Pinnacle's values as a company. If their employees felt comfortable treating her this way, what did that say about their commitment to diversity and inclusion, especially in a partnership that was supposed to be built on mutual respect? Jonathan was horrified. He apologized profusely, promising to investigate the incident immediately. He assured Aisha that this was not the culture Pinnacle stood for and that he would take swift action against the employees involved. But Aisha wasn't interested in apologies. She had spent her entire career fighting for her place in a world that often refused to see her worth, and she wasn't about to let this slide. She told Jonathan that the deal was off, effective immediately. She said that Carter Tech would not be moving forward with a $2.8 billion partnership, and she hung up the phone before he could respond. The lobby was silent as Aisha picked up her card from the counter and walked out of the hotel. Ethan, Samantha, and Richard stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened slowly sinking in. They had no idea that their actions had cost their company one of the biggest deals in its history. Aisha, meanwhile, didn't look back. She got into her car and drove to a different hotel, one where she had stayed before and knew she would be treated with the respect she deserved. As she checked in, her phone began to buzz with calls and messages from Jonathan and other Pinnacle executives, all begging her to reconsider. But Aisha had made up her mind. She wasn't going to work with a company that allowed its employees to treat her, or anyone else, like that. Word of the incident spread quickly. By the next morning, news outlets had picked up the story, and social media was ablaze with hashtags like #JusticeForAisha and #BoycottPinnacle. Carter Tech released a statement confirming that they had terminated the deal with Pinnacle Enterprises due to discriminatory behavior at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel. The statement emphasized Aisha's commitment to working with partners who shared her values of equity and respect. Public reaction was swift and unforgiving. Pinnacle's stock plummeted as investors reacted to the loss of the $2.8 billion deal, and customers began canceling their reservations at Pinnacle hotels in protest. Pinnacle Enterprises issued a public apology within 48 hours, acknowledging the incident and announcing that Ethan, Samantha, and Richard had been terminated. They also pledged to implement mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees and to conduct a thorough review of their policies to prevent similar incidents in the future. Jonathan personally reached out to Aisha again, offering to meet with her to discuss how they could make things right. He admitted that the company had failed her and promised to do better. But Aisha wasn't ready to forgive. She told Jonathan that actions spoke louder than words, and Pinnacle would need to prove their commitment to change before she would even consider working with them again. In the weeks that followed, Aisha became a symbol of resilience and accountability. She was invited to speak at conferences and events, where she shared her story and called for greater representation and equity in corporate America. She didn't shy away from discussing the challenges she had faced as a Black woman in tech, and her honesty resonated with millions of people who had experienced similar discrimination. Carter Tech, meanwhile, continued to thrive. Aisha quickly pivoted to a new partnership with a different hospitality chain, one that had a proven track record of inclusivity. The new deal, while smaller than the one with Pinnacle, was a step forward, and Aisha felt confident that she had made the right decision. Pinnacle Enterprises struggled to recover from the fallout. The loss of the Carter Tech deal was a major blow, not just financially but also to their reputation. They spent months trying to rebuild trust with their customers and the public, but the damage had been done. For Aisha, the incident was a turning point. It reminded her of why she had started Carter Tech in the first place, to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked and underestimated, just as she had been. She vowed to continue using her platform to advocate for change, ensuring that no one else would have to endure the kind of humiliation she had faced at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel. Aisha's story spread far beyond the business world. It became a rallying cry for those fighting against systemic racism and bias in all industries. Schools and universities began using her experience as a case study in business ethics courses, highlighting the importance of cultural sensitivity and the consequences of failing to uphold it. Aisha herself remained focused on her mission at Carter Tech, but she also took on a new role as a mentor, particularly for young Black women entering the tech industry. She wanted them to know that they could achieve greatness, even in the face of adversity, and that their worth was not defined by the ignorance of others. Years later, Aisha would reflect on that day at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel as a defining moment in her career. It wasn't just about the $2.8 billion deal she had walked away from. It was about the stand she had taken for herself and for others who had been marginalized. She had shown the world that she wouldn't be silenced or diminished, and in doing so, she had inspired countless others to demand the respect they deserved. Pinnacle Enterprises eventually made strides toward change, implementing new policies and earning back some of their credibility, but they never fully regained Aisha's trust. For her, the lesson was clear. True success wasn't just about the deals you made, it was about the principles you stood for. The incident also had a ripple effect on the hospitality industry as a whole. Other hotel chains began to take a hard look at their own practices, implementing training programs and policies to ensure that no guest would ever face the kind of discrimination Aisha had endured. Some even reached out to Carter Tech, hoping to partner with Aisha and benefit from her expertise in sustainable technology. Aisha was selective about who she worked with, prioritizing companies that demonstrated a genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion. She knew that her decision to cancel the Pinnacle deal had sent a message, not just to Pinnacle but to the entire corporate world. Respect and integrity were non-negotiable. Aisha's influence continued to grow in the years that followed. She was named one of the most powerful women in business by several major publications, and her story was featured in documentaries and books about leadership and social justice. She used her platform to advocate for policies that would address systemic racism in corporate America, working with lawmakers and activists to push for change. At Carter Tech, she implemented initiatives to support underrepresented groups in tech, offering scholarships, mentorship programs, and internships to help the next generation of innovators succeed. For the employees at the Grand Pinnacle Hotel, the consequences of their actions were a harsh lesson. Ethan and Samantha, the two clerks who had laughed at Aisha, struggled to find new jobs after their termination. The incident had been widely publicized, and their names were forever linked to the scandal. Richard, the manager, faced similar challenges. He issued a public apology months later, admitting that he had been wrong and expressing regret for his behavior. But for Aisha, their apologies were too little, too late. She had moved on, focusing on her mission to create a better, more equitable world. The $2.8 billion deal that Pinnacle lost was a turning point for Aisha, but it was also a wake-up call for the corporate world. It showed that no company, no matter how big or powerful, was immune to the consequences of discrimination. Aisha's story became a reminder that true leadership meant standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, and that the fight for equality was far from over. Through her actions, Aisha Carter had not only protected her own dignity but had also paved the way for others to demand the respect they deserved, leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come.